Hello everyone! In this episode of MySQL Developer Essentials, I'm going to talk about some of the reasons why you may want to migrate your MySQL databases to Azure Database for MySQL Flexible Server. I'm also going to walk you through the main stages and activities that you should be aware of when migrating your databases. Azure Database for MySQL Flexible Server is a fully managed, scalable MySQL database based on the latest community editions of MySQL, and it is very easy to set up, operate, and scale. By migrating MySQL to Azure, you will be able to focus on application development and innovate faster because you don't need to spend time on managing the security, updates, and database backups. Azure Database for MySQL will also give you high availability with up to 99.99% SLA and a choice of single zone on zone redundant high availability. Azure gives you MySQL database and applications other benefits as well. You will be able to easily monitor the performance of your database and application through Azure Monitor and optimize your workload using metrics that help you maintain the performance, reliability, and availability of your server and applications. You will also be able to optimize total cost of ownership with burstable instances and stop-start capabilities, ensuring you are only paying for storage only when your database is stopped. Once your MySQL databases have been migrated to Azure Database for MySQL, you will also be able to integrate with other Azure services and the integrated data platform to build and deploy modern applications. A typical database migration project consists of 3 stages, which all have various activities and tasks. For your migration project to be successful, it is a good idea to follow some of the best practices and consider these tasks before you start the migration, during the migration, and after the migration has been completed. In the pre-migration stage, you should assess the source system, analyze the database, the hosting environment, as well as the application workloads to better understand how you should plan the migration. For example, you should be aware of some of the limitations in Azure Database for MySQL that may affect your migration plan. Azure Database for MySQL supports only InnoDB and memory storage engines. So, you should first migrate other storage engines like MyISAM to support its storage engine. The DBA, Super, and Definer privileges have some limitations for security reasons, and selecting data into an out file or loading data using an in file are disabled. You want to evaluate which of the various migration methods and tools are the most suitable for your environment and how the migration affects your applications and the users. MySQL dump is typically provided as part of the MySQL installation. It creates logical backups as a set of SQL statements that can be replayed to rebuild the database to a point in time. However, MySQL dump is not intended as a fast or scalable solution for backup or migrating very large amounts of data. MyDumper and MyLoader are multi-threaded tools written in C++ that take advantage of parallelism and can send the data as fast as possible to the target MySQL instance. However, you may have to compile these tools from the source code yourself, which is not a trivial task for most users. You can also use Azure Database Migration Service, which is an Azure cloud-based tool that helps you simplify, guide, and automate your database migration to Azure. It will allow you to migrate your data, schema, and objects from multiple sources to the cloud easily at scale. It supports fast, parallelized offline migrations, which significantly reduce the time it takes to migrate data from your source system to the target database. It relies on binlog replication feature of MySQL to complete tasks. There are also other considerations, such as latency of the network and the size of your databases, which may affect the time to migrate a database to the cloud. You also want to have some sort of test plan to verify that the migrated database is consistent and the performance of the migrated database meets the baseline performance of your source system. The test plan should also ensure acceptable network connectivity between on-premises and the Azure network. You will also want to ensure that all the identified applications and users can connect to the migrated data instance. In the actual migration stage, you will execute the migration using the tool that best suits your needs. To prepare your target Azure database for MySQL Server for faster data loads, there are some best practices that you should consider. First, you want to scale up the storage tier. The IOPS for Azure Database for MySQL Server increases progressively with the increase in storage tier. For faster loads, you may want to increase the storage tier to increase the IOPS provisioned. Another way to scale up the server during the data load phase is to scale up the server to vCore 32 Business Critical SKU from the pricing tier of the Azure portal during migration to increase the InnoDB buffer pool size. InnoDB buffer pool size can only be increased by scaling up compute for Azure Database for MySQL. You will also want to turn off the slow query log so that you can eliminate the overhead caused by slow query logging during data loads. There are some other server parameters and configuration settings to consider during a migration, and all of them are described with more detail in the documentation. After migration of the databases has been completed, there are some additional tasks that you need to consider. Some of the activities in the post-migration phase are things like configuring high availability and disaster recovery to make sure your databases support business continuity. Since Azure Database for MySQL Flexible Server is a managed intelligence service which is easy to set up, operate and scale, it just works. However, you may want to configure and turn on some of the monitoring and security-related features of Azure so that you will have a fully monitored environment with best-in-class security and performance. For example, you may want to configure slow query logging so that you will be able to identify performance bottlenecks during troubleshooting. Slow query logs are integrated with Azure Monitor diagnostic settings. You want to periodically review the performance of your environment to drive compute tier upgrades and scale decisions. After your MySQL databases have been migrated to Azure Database for MySQL and you have completed all the post-migration steps, you can focus on the application and developer productivity instead of spending time on database and infrastructure management tasks, such as applying patches and security fixes. Azure will take care of all these things for you, and much more. You can also use Azure Advisor to get security, performance, and reliability recommendations for your MySQL databases and applications. The process of moving existing databases and MySQL workloads into the cloud can present challenges with respect to the workload functionality and the connectivity of existing applications. To make your migration journey to Azure easier, we have published a migration guide which is designed to provide actionable information and guidance that will lead to the successful planning and execution of a MySQL migration to Azure. This guide is available in the resources section of the Azure Database for MySQL documentation. I hope you found this video about MySQL migrations to Azure useful. Happy migrations and thank you for watching.